It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be speaking to you on behalf of the young people in the IGAD region. I sit as the steering committee chair for the 2020 IGAD Youth and Land Conference. And we have taken it upon us to drive land governance beyond policy. We thank you for your support. We thank you for recognizing the position of the young people in the realm of changing and disruptive theories of governance and management. We request for your audience not only to hear, but to respond to the theme of today's conference, which is Beyond Policy.
My name is Sunafik Ishgazahin. I'm the lecturer of land administration in the Metropolitan University. I am from Ethiopia. So I'm going to present on the customary land tenure system in the face of academia. Let me introduce customary land tenure system. Customary land tenure system is a base for indigenous communities of IGAD region to operate different land right expressions like use, access, and possession. But most of the time, women may not get vulnerable through this system. So the academic world supports the practice of customary tenure system in different ways. One thing, in modernizing the structures and the weak legal status of the system, and by increasing knowledge and skill on the land rights, especially for the users, women, traditional leaders, and other vulnerable societies. So here the academic circle may advocate training for users, women, and the customary leaders, sorting out problems and researching through organizing public events and other community services, and by taking initiative for the inclusion of customary land tenure system in the regular education systems or in curriculums. So those advocacies may have a lot of contributions. The first thing is it can change the patriarchal influence, especially on women. It can amend the customary laws and the practices. It can be a means to have long-term tenure security. It can increase the participation of women in agricultural sector. It can bring women more productive and strategists for conservation. And it can make women to realize and claim their land rights. The academic circle can influence different groups in customary land tenure system. Very importantly, that of women, traditional leaders, and other vulnerable groups, and particularly for the young women and the users, by shaping the structures of the customary land tenure system and by informing the users of the rights, especially for the women.
My name is Valentine Opanga. I'm first of all a research fellow at University of Bonn, but also the secretary of the steering committee of the Youth and Land Governance. I've come to understand policies have issues with implementation. Most of the time, they're just artifacts gathering dust somewhere on shelves, and we as youth don't really get to know what's in it. And I'm talking about a problem that we have as youth because we have alternative modes of communication that we can relate with. For example, I as a youth would prefer if policies were communicated through social media, for example, and not just as PDF files, but as key areas that we can relate with. I would want to request you to do policies in with the web as the core channel rather than as an afterthought. You launch a policy, put it in PDF, and then make us read it. Some of us don't like reading PDF documents and them representing a million others. And I would like to pose a question on what if policies were done in a participatory manner, and where we would actually sit as peer reviewers, the youth give you feedback, and you get to implement, since we don't get a chance to sit at the negotiating table, and if we do, then it's usually just to make the numbers. What if policies were communicated in stories that we can relate to rather than just a document with legal jargon? I believe that if you give us a chance to get into this space, then we'll be able to communicate policies better, because we are the majority anyway.
My name is Judith Atkunda. I am a surveyor at LandNet Uganda, and also a member of the IGAD Youth and Land Governance Steering Committee. And this presentation is going to focus on gender statistics in a youth-centered development. What the situation looks like is that there are very many efforts now for us to produce gender statistics in the different IGAD member states. I personally come from Uganda, and what is happening is that looking at the wider national statistical system, is we are trying to have everyone, every actor on board, civil society, the government, the private sector, the donor organizations, to all focus on us trying to realign and produce adequate gender statistics. And this is because the demand for this data is increasing, because it's being used for both international and national gender mainstreaming efforts. It is important that we have comprehensive data and evidence so that we are able to inform the policies where we need these youth to be integrated, to be helped. So building an evidence-based specific youth data set is very important. It is important for us to note that a lot has gone forward, because when you look at generation of statistics, especially gender statistics, just meaning that it should be sex disaggregated, showing men, showing women, and it can cut across any phenomena or any sector. And this is true for land governance. So Internet of Things, where you have data coming from so many devices, from satellites, from mobile phones, from sensors and everything, all that data is what we need for us to be able to generate these gender statistics. And youth at the center of this. Storage of this data, cloud storage now, is also a technology that is really taking shape. So all this in place, that the youth have the capacity to be able to support on all these endeavors and all these efforts, for us to be able to improve even how we generate our gender statistics and do the reporting to be able to better our policy formulation. Action points, we call upon governments as they build and strengthen their statistical systems to take key note, because what we've mentioned earlier are very, very key sources of information, of data that inform statistics. We have the knowledge for using that data, and we have the capacity with the youth at the center of that. Then we are able to take particular actions that will help us achieve the sustainable development goals that we so desire.
Once again, my name is Stella Maris Nakachwa, and as previously heard, and the entire focus of this conference, for us to be able to accelerate action for improved women's land tenure security, is an indicator for us to recast within our space on the specialization of tech women in land governance. So I would like us to take a snippet of the situation with the already exacerbated situation of having lesser numbers of women in the entire job or workforce market. We have only 1/4 and less for women in tech in government business. It is an appalling situation, but why? Some of the questions we could ask ourselves. And yet here we are all on this platform agreeing that technology, and especially disruptive technology to date, like some of our colleagues have said, big data and all, is a driver for land governance. Here I picked out some research and I realized that, yes, it's actually documented that tech is an innovative equipment to drive land governance, to provide more data, to enhance policies, and to give us better governance of land, and especially for women and young women in particular. However, in most of the research that you find on the internet indicates that women are only consumers, which indicates that we need to find out who creates this technology, who generates that data and develops the tools. Does this implicate the absorption of women's land rights in the space of land tenure security? Who manages the data systems? Do women exist in technology and can contribute in the land governance spaces? I pick this as a lived experience. I come from Uganda, and in 2019, we had an opportunity to have our land information system launched. And from these pictures that I present to you, one was the left wing of the room and one was the right wing of the room. You can barely see numbers of women. This is women in general. And already for us, that's a reflection on if we need to accelerate and drive policy for women's land rights, then don't we need to rethink the absorption of women, especially tech women, in the spaces of land governance? If you look at the structure of the land governance framework, you realize that it's not only a component of administration, it's not only a component of analytics, but it's also a component of field data collection, installation of field segments, servers, monitoring internet, and then communications as well. And then also developments like databases and creation of data through geospatial technologies, remote sensing, and all avenues. Do we have enough women in these spaces? Already we see that we already have lesser numbers, so we need to think about having more women, because when we have women in all these levels, then we are specializing, and we are working towards building improved land rights. However, we are also creating a representation that drives cognitive reproduction of women in these spaces. We are also reordering the spaces for debate, because if we are talking about having more women in agriculture, young women, youth in gardens, how about not talk about have these young women in the tech spaces? And in doing so, we will be able to improve and accelerate this action feasibly. So there is need to reflect. And to conclude on this short thought for all of us to reflect on, I say that women in control rooms must be equal or greater to the women on property titles and in boardrooms and in gardens. Thank you so much, and I hope it creates a new perspective of discussion in this conference, and we can be able to generate very fundamental and critical action towards improving land governance for women and especially young women.
So my name is Ogina Hilary. I work with Kenya Land Alliance that deals with policy advocacy on various land issues in Kenya. As far as communication to the youth is concerned, I would want to reiterate that it is important for government to package information in youth-centric and youth-friendly ways. Our youth are a dynamic that have for long remained missing in land tenure issues, yet when it comes to the perpetration of violence, then youth are in the forefront. So I just reiterate that there is need to package information that is youth-friendly. There is need to package information that is uncomplicated and untechnical to ensure that youth disinterest in land is well addressed, and that youth also take the center stage. Finally, youth are not a homogeneous groups. Within the youth, there are rural youth, there are indigenous youth, there are youth living in urban and informal areas. By and large, there are youth that are land marginalized in various ways. So it is important that information in youth is put across in an effective way. Thank you very much.
I am Dana Chalo from Kenya, currently working with Cadastre Foundation as Assistant Program Specialist. Just to put some words on young women and technology, youth form a very large part of our population, and it's a very interesting time to leverage on this, on our innovations, to harness this technology to speed up the process of realizing secure tenure for all. It's just an emphasis of saying we have the solutions and we also have the expertise. Given the chance, we can use it.